Okay. So I'm, again, like I said, I'm Sam Blatt. I use she, her pronouns. Happy to be here. Organizer of Progress Iowa. So happy to be here. Like I said, a big goal of this meeting is to just create a community where Iowans can come together. We can connect our progressive voices from across the state. We're going to be empowering everyone who's already on the ground and contributing to their work, not overshadowing it. We want to contribute and help, amplify that. And we're also here so we can help provide toolkits, trainings, and resources that you need, whether it's digital, on the ground, et cetera. Like, we want to be able to support all the great work that folks are doing already across our state, especially in rural areas. If you haven't yet, please put your name and where you're from in the chat. If you're with an organization, please list that as well. We're just, like I said, super excited to have progressive folks all across the state join us tonight. So thank you so much. Amy, if you want to introduce yourself, go ahead.
Hey, Amy Adams, and I am an organizer with Progress Iowa. And our first Power Hour, we introduced the entire staff. We were all here. We've had kind of a busy week with the Governor Reynolds giving the State of the Union response. So you just have a couple of folks on the call tonight, but I'll go ahead and just share a little bit of our staff. So Matt Sinovic is our executive director, and Matt is on the call tonight. Yena Balakiani is our partnership director. And she is actually not on the call tonight, but she does a communications call with partner organizations. I know, Lance, you're a part of that. She works with a lot of the different organizations in the state. Catherine Kuckelman and James Simmons are our two press people. James is on the call tonight. They handle all of the press materials. And of course, Sam and I are organizers. All of our amazing graphics and all of our amazing digital stuff comes from Ivy Beckenholt. She's our digital director. And then you guys will hear tonight from Katie Siddle, who is our messaging director. And she's going to share a little bit with you about messaging. And so, Katie, I'm going to kick it over to you.
Great, thank you. I think if we want to go to the slide that starts on messaging. See, yep, here we go. So just to start things off, Progress Iowa is creating messaging guides pretty regularly now, both with tested messages that we are testing ourselves and with messaging that we're getting from national organizations that do a lot of their own testing. So basically, we're trying to bring talking points to you that are based on data. And our tests, we put them in front of Iowans, and when there are national issues that have public information, we use those to make sure that, that information goes into what we're testing, and it also goes into message guides that we're building. So basically, we're trying to give you guys a formula of, and I'm sorry if you hear a dog whining a lot in the background, giving you a formula to kind of craft your LTEs and other documents that you're creating to reach out to your legislators and inspire your neighbors. So just kind of jumping ahead to some of my notes. Again, like, we're using polling as well to just kind of inform every piece of it. We're leaning into Iowa values to start all of these messages. And even that is based on stuff that we've pulled in the field, or that has been pulled. We say these things, but we actually have heard from Iowans that they are very proud of being good, caring, and kind. When Iowans think of themselves, they think of helping others and being good neighbors, working together. They think of themselves as being honest and hardworking, good moral people. So we incorporate a lot of that into our messaging. We also follow something that's been proven to engage folks and really help get over some of the fear mongering that goes on in some of these conversations. And starting with that value helps engage folks and remind them of what you're for. It kind of pulls them into the message. Using sort of uniting messaging, like saying, no matter who we are, no matter where we come from or what color we are, no matter our race or our zip code, that sort of stuff kind of reminds people that we're all the same. So I think we can probably hop to the next slide. I just wanted to get some basics out. So corporate sellout message. This is one of our top tested messages. Before we started really doing anything at the start of this year after the expanded staff, we tested a few ways to frame Governor Reynolds. And the one that cut the best across every single demographic in Iowa was framing her as a corporate sellout. And that, I think there's a lot of reasoning behind that. A lot of people are struggling while corporations are making a lot of money. And she has a very clear pattern of giving handouts to corporations. So framing her as a governor who ignores us in favor of corporate greed, we still start that out with a value though, reminding our fellow Iowans that we work hard and take care of our families. We want leaders who will do what's right so that we can do our best. And then we define what's in the way of that value, but not as a barrier. We want to define it as something that the voter can overcome. But Governor Reynolds ignores us in favor of corporate greed. Iowans are hurting while big companies make record profits, all thanks to their corporate sellout, Kim Reynolds. And then when you close, you want to give people something that they can do, a call to action, show them what they can achieve. So we're closing with Iowans deserve a governor who values our families and does what's right. By standing together and holding the greedy accountable, we can create an Iowa that's good for all of us, not just the corporations that back Governor Reynolds. Next slide, please. And so another one of our top tested messages is sort of in the same lane as the last one. And this was testing to figure out what was going to help people realize that the Reynolds tax plan is not good for Iowans. The best message that came out of that test was calling on Reynolds' workforce crisis. And so again, we're talking about how Iowans are hardworking people who take pride in their jobs, but fewer Iowans are working today than when Governor Reynolds took office. There aren't enough workers to keep our schools, hospitals, and small businesses open. Now Reynolds is doubling down on the policies that created her workforce crisis, the ones that give the wealthy and big business tax breaks while taking money away from our public schools, public safety, healthcare, and healthcare services. This isn't the right direction for Iowa or the nation. We need to focus on Biden's plan to invest in infrastructure and put people back to work. We want our hometowns to be attractive places to live, work, and raise a family. And that conclusion was actually tweaked for the State of the Union. Can people hear me okay over my background noise? Okay. Thank you. We can go on to the next slide. So in those messages, you can take our messages and say them verbatim. We love that. We love seeing it. I think it's really good to get, the message out there in whatever capacity you can, retweet Ivy's tweets, restate what's in our messaging guide. That's, there's nothing wrong with that at all. And repetition is really good. It can feel weird sometimes, but it's a good thing. So if you want to combine some of these messages and tailor them and add, maybe some flavor from what you're dealing with, I think anecdotes and personalizing things can really strengthen them. I know when I worked for a legislator, when constituents would come in and talk about their issues, it really helped to have something emotional connected to it, to remember it. So this example, I just kind of threw some stuff together from a couple of these messages and added a little bit about my own family. So Iowans are hardworking people who take pride in their jobs. My mom's worked her whole life as a nurse, taking care of our community and family, but what does she get out of corporate Kim's latest tax plan? Nothing. It's all for the rich and the big corporations who made record profits during the pandemic. Corporate Kim Reynolds ignores us in favor of corporate greed. Instead of addressing the Reynolds workforce crisis and paying workers what we're owed, she's doubling down on the policies that created it. We need a governor who will put people over profits and make Iowa a more attractive place to live, work, and raise a family. Next slide. So another example of kind of merging these, this is some messaging that we put together for the State of the Union and the Reynolds response to it. I think this was on the flat tax. Yeah. I can read the header that I wrote. So we merged a couple of these messages with the workforce crisis and corporate Reynolds again, and applied it to the State of the Union, and just started it out with that value again. Iowans value hard work and deserve to be rewarded for it. But the GOP's new favorite sellout, corporate Kim Reynolds, is doubling down on the policies that created the Reynolds workforce crisis and will only make it worse. She's rewarding wealth instead of work. The rich don't need a new handout. Our communities need investing in. Iowans need leadership that will make our state a more attractive place to live, work, and raise a family. Next one. So those were just kind of a few examples of how you can use our message guides to frame what you're working on. And again, like that repetition thing I mentioned, reuse them, recycle them, repurpose them, because I think we know that through the legislative session, the Republicans are going to keep hitting on the same issues, and then those are going to go into their campaigns, and they're going to talk about that flat tax, vouchers, corporate job growth, like how corporations grow jobs, and cutting their corporate taxes. And so I think that these messages, we're going to be able to reuse them. We don't have to reinvent the wheel every conversation. So you can use the guides to help frame what you're talking about. I think maybe there's one more slide. Yep. So just a little more like reminding on some of the things that we're working on. When you start framing these up, working with a value off the bat really helps engage the audience. And then defining the problem, the opposition that is standing in the way of our shared value. But when you're doing that, when you're talking about what's in front of us, we don't want to repeat what the opposition is saying, even to like negate it. We don't want to say, Kim thinks her plan is going to do X, Y, and Z. We don't want to say exactly what she's saying, because that just gives her points more airtime. We just want to skip over it, say what it really is, and move forward with how we think we can overcome it. Making sure that voters feel like they're a protagonist, that they have options and actions they can take, providing outcomes that will come out of it. I know when we were writing the Supreme Court nominee guide, we made sure to include a lot of like tangibles in there. Like this could help reform our justice system. This is going to change the lives of Black girls and women everywhere around the world. And then ending with that call to action, you're asking people to do something. So just, remind them what that is, so it makes it easier. Thanks. If anyone has questions, I'm happy to take them whenever appropriate.
Yeah, Katie, if you want to stick around, and we'll do questions after we're all done sharing. So I get to follow up with Katie's amazing information and talk to you just a little bit about what value-based messaging is. So in putting together these guides and in putting together this information to share out to people and different groups and organizations, but also individuals like Sam mentioned, who are on the ground doing the work, people just like you and me who write letters to the editor, to papers on issues and things like that. We found that value-based messaging is really important, and it's really impactful. So we use a lot of modeling by Anat Shankar-Osario. And sort of her philosophy or her belief is to engage the base. That's our folks, our supporters that we can rely on. Get them energized, get them motivated with this message. But then it's to persuade the middle. So those folks, those independents, they may not have their mind made up on something. So when we approach these messages, we're always thinking about that. How do we engage the base, and how do we persuade the middle? So it's really hard. When I sit down to write a letter to the editor, the first thing I want to do is complain, right? Because that's what has inspired me probably to write that letter to the editor. I'm maybe upset about something, or something is bothering me. But instead, what we want to do is not necessarily focus on the problem, but focus on what it is that brings us together. Like Katie mentioned in her messaging, those values that we share. What is it about Iowans that bring us together? And so when we focus on those shared values and when we lead with those values, it has a greater tendency to bring people in, engaging that base and persuading that middle. So that's part of the reason that we do this value-based messaging. So bringing people together. The other thing that we want to do is we want to focus on what's the outcome that we want from this? What's the positive that we can see coming from this? What's the change that we can see coming from this? So that's another reason we want to talk about these shared values or this value-based messaging. So not just complaining about a problem, which is, very easy for us to do, but, talking about a future and what is it that we want? What is our vision? What comes next? And you can go ahead and move the slide forward, James. Thank you. So one of the things that we need to think about is how we can, bring people in. And like Katie mentioned in her messaging, when we do talk about those values or those things that we can share, those things that we agree on, most Iowans value strong public schools, right? So that's a value that we can bring in and sort of bring folks to the table. We can talk about, most Americans believe that everyone should have the right to vote. Everyone should have access to voting. So whether you're a Democrat or a Republican or an independent, those are values that we share. And like Katie mentioned, when you use these messaging guides, definitely insert that personal piece of it, your personal story. What is an example that you can give from your own life that, ties all of this together? So we're talking about our experiences. We're using these shared values. We're talking about bringing everyone to the table, regardless of race, regardless of religion, regardless of zip code, economic background. And that is, that idea that we are using to engage the base and persuade the middle. Okay, and you can move on to the next slide. So our very first training that we did a month ago, it feels like it was just yesterday, but our very first training that we did a month ago, we focused on how to get our messaging out in sort of bite-sized chunks. And we talked about how to use these messages on social media. So if folks were Twitter users, we talked about putting it into the 200 or 250 characters, putting something out there. Tucker, I noticed, put in the chat, corporate Kim, that was a hashtag that we were using on the night that she delivered the response to the State of the Union address. So taking these messages, putting them into smaller pieces, sharing them on social media. We know that Facebook is a great way for folks to get information. So if we can share this value-based messaging on Facebook, on public groups, on your own pages, it's a good way to share our message with other folks. So Ivy, our digital director, put together these great tips for how to use social media. Using hashtags like Iowa, IA Legis, IA Gov, IA Senate, and like Tucker mentioned in the chat, corporate Kim, that was the one that we used to incorporate our messaging into it. Retweeting messages or sharing messages from pages like Progress Iowa, Today, like One Iowa or Iowa Safe Schools, when that terrible transgender girls athletics ban passed, organizations that are sharing a message that we want to uplift, make sure that we're, retweeting and resharing that on social media. So social media is one really great way to reach a lot of people very quickly. I will say one of the drawbacks that happens oftentimes with social media is we tend to sometimes operate in a bubble. So we like Facebook pages that are amenable to our background or to our views. We follow, folks on Twitter who have similar backgrounds or similar views. And that's good, but sometimes we don't always reach a broader audience or people who think differently than what we do. And sometimes we anger trolls and we find a very different audience. That's okay too. But it's, sometimes it's a little bit of a bubble. So the next thing that I want to talk to you a little bit about with messaging is how we can maybe reach a broader audience, people a little bit outside of maybe our same viewpoint. So letters to the editor. letters to the editor are still one of the most read parts of the paper. The exception to that is on Sunday, because on Sunday you get like the whole burger, right, with the lettuce and tomatoes and cheese, and it's got all those really great parts in it. So it does go a little bit further down on the list, but people still read letters to the editor. And letters to the editor are a great way to reach a larger, more diverse audience. And I've heard, and I reaffirmed this with James today, when folks who work for congressional staffers skim through the papers and the letters to the editor, they do look for their congressional staffers' names. They want to see how people are talking about it. How did they vote on a policy issue? And did that get a response in the newspaper? So it does get the attention of people in a way that maybe an email or a phone call won't, because if someone voted a certain way on an issue and you write a letter to the editor about that, that's reaching a very wide audience. When you write letters to the editor, I always tell people, if you can post on Facebook, like if you're really, passionate about something, you can write a letter to the editor. And that's the easiest way to write a letter to the editor, is to take something that you've already written from social media and then sort of tweak it and use some of these messaging tips and tricks, and turn that into a letter to the editor that you can publish and reach a broader and wider audience. And you have that power to persuade those people. The other thing that writing a letter to the editor does is it allows you to share a personal story. And we know that when people share personal stories, we feel that connection with them, and we share that experience, even though we may not have experienced it ourselves. We can share that experience through other people. The other thing with letters to the editor is we can use it to help influence public opinions. People may not know about a certain issue. I'll be honest, I didn't know a lot about the carbon pipelines in Iowa. And then I started reading some letters to the editor and started finding out a little bit more about it. So it can be a way to inform people, to influence public opinion. And then it's also a way to call people to action. We can have this if we do this. Here's what this might look like if we do this. So call your senator, call your representative, tell them to vote no, or tell them to support this, or if there's an event or something happening, you can call people to action behind that. So letters to the editor are taking those social media pieces and just growing them a little bit, adding on to them, making them a little more robust, and then reaching a broader audience. So letters to the editor is another way that we can share those messaging guides that Katie talked about. And Sam, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Hello, excuse me. Hello again, everyone. The next step in messaging and with LTEs and with social media is how you tell your story. And being a storyteller, it's an intimate thing. It takes a lot to be able to open up and share your story and share what happens and how policies have affected you for either the good or, for the bad, a lot, especially in our state going on right now with the legislature. And so finding that story and finding your voice can be hard, but it's so important to be able to share that and be able to persuade people with that value-based messaging, because it's an appeal and it connects people. So, they have the stories, like it says here on the slide, they have the ability to connect us to people that we've never met. Like I don't know all 60,000 people that live in Waterloo, but if I read something in, an LTE in the Courier, I'm probably likely to reach out to the person who wrote it, or, at least feel that connection that because it resonated with me, that, their situation is similar to what I've experienced, or, or I feel compassion for something that I've never experienced, but I know is going on out there. And it really draws people into our cause because it does have that emotional appeal. It allows us to express ourselves, our values, not just as abstract principles or just facts, to digest and regurgitate, but as our own lived experiences, and they have the power to move other people to act. And then it has a call to action. So really, how do you do that? You pick something that is affecting you. So today, obviously very, very relevant issue. There was a young lady named Gabby, I believe in Cedar Rapids in that area. And she is being affected by this bill against trans athletes, trans girls in sports in Iowa schools. And she's sharing her story and she's saying why it's bad, why this policy is bad, connecting it to her and her school and her classmates, and then how it's going to affect not only her, generations to come, folks in sports now. And she kind of developed it into why it matters to not people, to why it doesn't matter to only just trans athletes, but their cis partners and athletes within their organizations as well. And that calls us to action. What do we need change? We need this legislation change. We need in it to get overturned in the court. And this is why. This is Gabby's story, right? And it's very powerful. We feel compelled, to act now because we know how important it is. We saw this person, get excluded from playing sports in school, right? So we understand how bad the legislation is as a surface level, but when you connect it and you put a face to it, it's like, it's changing. It makes you think and it makes you connect it even more. So storytelling is a powerful thing. And like I said, it's intimate to do too. You really have to have, it's bravery to be able to share your story and how things are affecting, because you never know how many other people are feeling the exact same way, but just haven't expressed their opinion on it yet. So for those of you who are sharing your stories, please keep doing it. It's so important. And if you haven't shared your story yet, talk to me and I'm happy to help you amplify your voice, because we really need to tell why these policies are bad, or thank people for the good policies. So yeah. Thank you guys so much to be able to be here and learn how to be doing this, because I know a lot of you already are, but we always need more faces to show up and start doing that. And then like I said, it brings us to a call to action, and it also brings questions. So if you have any, please let us know right now.